Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Chalon. Thanks for joining us in this next episode of In the Nick of Time. This is going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about culture, DevSecOps, Agile, how to keep up with the pace of relevance, how to learn, how to continuously improve yourself, how to invest in your people if you have a team and you're trying to build a DevSecOps organization, how to accelerate your DevSecOps journey, but also how to assess your maturity in DevSecOps as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Today, we're going to have a special guest. Raja, the CEO of Oteemo, will be joining us to talk about how he's helped organizations, including at Platform One and the DoD, move to DevSecOps and accelerate their journey, and how easy investing in his people to get there, and how you should think about investing in yourself or inside or with your people in terms of continuous learning, and how to accelerate that journey. First, wanted to remind everybody, if you're not already following the show, please do that so you can get the notifications of your of the emails of the shows every week. Next week, we're going to get a special guest again from the Air Force and Space Force with the Digital Transformation Office. We'll be talking about modeling and simulation, how to move to a digital twin, and how to accelerate that continuous evolution, innovation, transformation of your legacy or new weapon systems or hardware/software capabilities. So that's going to be a lot of fun as well. So stay tuned for that next week. Please register on that link, ama.preventbreach.com/register. You can also just go to preventbreach.com and register there. And you're going to get an email every week to remind you of the next show and what's coming up. Also, if you're not already doing that, you can now see the show on YouTube. So if you go to the youtube.com/my name, Nicolas Chalon, you're going to be able to see and subscribe and see the show live as well. So if it's easier for you to follow the show on YouTube, in fact, it's live, so you don't have a little bit of delay that you see on LinkedIn. So usually a better streaming option. So do that if you want to do that. We already have quite a few people today moving to YouTube instead of LinkedIn. So that's great. We're going to be taking your questions live today, as always. So make sure you put your questions in the comment section below. So start with a Q so we know it's a question. And if you just want to share you here and what company you're with, know that if you're on YouTube, we don't get to see your LinkedIn profile. So sometimes you don't have a picture there. You can always set a picture quick and use the same picture than your LinkedIn. But also you can just post and put in the comment what company you're with, and even maybe your LinkedIn profile as well. And we see today again a lot of people joining us from all over the world, including from Australia, UK, Europe, France, Germany, and Japan, and even the United States, of course. So this is exciting, and even Latin America. So just a reminder for people that missed it before we get started, check out particularly the two hacks. I think it's pretty significant with Samsung Galaxy source code and NVIDIA. And there's a typo there again on my slide. NVIDIA getting hacked, where what we've seen is effectively malicious actor go after source code now and really trying to get into the crown jewel and effectively exfiltrate that source code and making it so they can then analyze it and potentially find exploits and 0 days inside of that source code, which without a doubt will lead to massive amount of breaches in the next few months, weeks. As you know, NVIDIA is not just for gaming. It's also used for machine learning and GPUs, obviously. So that's going to be potentially a massive amount of breaches in the next few months. Hopefully not. We'll see. But I would pay attention to that. And as you can see, this is why DevSecOps matters. This is why we're here today to have this conversation with Raja today, to look into the importance of DevSecOps, how to have that baked-in cybersecurity into your software lifecycle, and also effectively your DevSecOps stack and your source code is your crown jewel now, and it's going to be the primary target of malicious actors. So don't forget about securing and treating your entire DevSecOps stack as cattle, and making sure that your stack is effectively leveraging software bill of materials, provenance checks, integrity checks to be able to assess where those dependencies are coming from, but also whether or not your software has been tempered, whether it's been tempered on the source code side, and that's why in DoD we use multi-set of eyes to approve a code change, or whether it's been attacked on the build server CI/CD side, where they would tamper with your code like a SolarWinds event after the build or during the build, and so you want to make sure your CI/CD pipeline is ephemeral and treated like cattle, so you can make sure that goes back to immutable state, and your source of truth is your source code. So we'll get started in a couple of minutes, but first I also wanted to remind everybody who our guest is, and we're going to bring him up in a couple of seconds. But Raja Gudepu is the founder and CEO of Oteemo. He started Oteemo on that premise that effective enterprise digital transformations are built as a solution and not just bought as a technology product, and that he leads the organization, the team, on that idea of really sharing that knowledge and educating the teams so these can scale, and you're not just buying some off-the-shelf capability thinking that that's going to magically solve all your DevSecOps needs. So really the service side and the education training is an essential part of the process there. And of course, in his role, Raja oversees the direction of the company and the strategy of the company, and he works hand in hand to ensure the customer success. And what's also interesting with Oteemo is the investment they're making into their employees and into the customers as a joint partnerships when it comes to training and learning and continuous learning, and how is he, we're going to talk about how he is investing in learning and certifications, and what certifications do make sense, don't make sense. I have my personal opinion on some of those, particularly when it comes to the cyber certifications, which are mostly useless compared to some of the newer certifications that you see coming out of the Linux Foundation, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, where you see hands-on certifications that you cannot just cheat your way in by just reading a couple of books and pretend you're an expert in the subject. So I think it's going to be fun. So let's bring Raja, and if you want to follow Raja, he's on LinkedIn and Twitter, but wanted to first welcome Raja to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey Nick, this is exciting. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect. All good. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Now after seeing your last lineup of guests like Lauren and Jay, I wasn't sure if I should be happy or concerned being the one to follow them. But regardless, I'm grateful. Thank you for having me.
Now you're on the hot seat today, but it's going to be fun because we're going to talk about a subject that is dear to me, but also probably even more to you, where we're talking about people, culture, training, learning, how to invest in your people. And, we see so many organizations, particularly in DoD, to be honest. And that's what I like also about Oteemo, the fact that you guys are not just doing DoD work or government work. You have a lot of commercial engagements as well. But, I think what's pretty unique is the fact that you want to proactively invest in your people. You know that, and we have Rod today, so I wanted to say hi to Rod. Is obviously from your team and has been part of Platform One now for 2 years, and now evangelizing again DevSecOps and software factories. So you see, you're spreading this knowledge, you're spreading all the good work we've been doing, and you've been doing. And we started this 3 years ago. You were part of the journey from the very beginning of Platform One and the DevSecOps initiative in DoD. But I wanted to have you today also to share your thoughts. And first, we're going to get started with just by giving us a quick overview of yourself, and then we'll talk a little bit about Oteemo and what made you think of creating a new company, And do mention where you were before that. That's always interesting to me. And then we want to do a deep dive first on the learning piece, and then we'll talk about DevSecOps maturity and how to assess yourself, how to accelerate. You mentioned the fact that DevSecOps is about that continuous learning, but then you also talk about in your bio about the fact that you can't just buy an off-the-shelf capability, but at the same time, Oteemo does provide what you call accelerators, so people don't start from zero. So it's not really a product, but it's kind of in the middle between the service side, the product side, and the learning and the training and the culture engagement that you do with your customers. So I love to talk about all of that. It's going to be a lot of subjects, and I wanted to remind everybody, if you want to share you here, do it in the comment section below, put your name and company. But also, if you want to ask a question, make sure you start with a Q so we know it's a question. Otherwise, we might miss it. Too many comments, and you don't get to see all of them because some people are on Twitter, some people are on LinkedIn, some people are on YouTube and Facebook. Although not many people on Facebook right now, thank God. But make sure you put the Q so we can see all those questions coming up. So let's start first, Raja, if you don't mind giving us a rundown of who you are.
Absolutely. So my journey, is of being the first generation immigrant here in the States. So I'm born and raised in India, southern part of India, in a city called Hyderabad. I've lived there for about 21 years until I finished my undergrad. My major in undergrad has been computer science, and after that, in pursuit of higher education, as they call it, for my graduate studies, I ended up here in the States, went to UMass Lowell, got my master's in comp science. And I initially thought I was going to go back, to my home country. But then it was one of those things where it's like, hey, you came here to study. Why don't you work a couple more years, get some real experience under your belt, and then figure something out? And I started off that journey as a software engineer, did network management systems, implemented those systems, and have been part of various functions in many organizations over 10, 12 years before I started Oteemo. And right before I started Oteemo, I did consulting for quite some time, and consulting is something that has truly been near and dear to me, and it's very different from the traditional contracting that we talk about. And the consulting that I was referring to when I was at Red Hat was more about how do you interact with your customers, how do you understand and empathize with them and where they want to go, and how do you solve problems that that matter to them, right? So started my journey in consulting and been at Red Hat for about 6.5 years, I think. Amazing company. I've learned a lot, in my stay at Red Hat. Doing things around middleware implementations, software implementations, organizational transformation around middleware when JBoss, WebLogic, and all those technologies were a thing back in the day, and I've every year my role was changing. I had an opportunity to work on not just technology leadership roles, but also organizational leadership roles. Learned a lot at Red Hat, and then I've always had this entrepreneurial itch, and it was about time in life, I guess, where if you don't do it now, you may never be able to do it, right? So I was like, all right, let's roll the dice. I got to do it, and at least give it a shot so that I wouldn't have any more regrets down the road, right? For not being able to do it. So yeah, I pulled the trigger and started Oteemo at that point, and the whole premise at that point, and I can go into what we do at Oteemo later, but it was more about, hey, the industry is going through this amazing transformation, after Agile and virtualization, this new wave of cloud transformation and cloud native transformations were about to start, and it's in its infancy, and DevOps was starting to emerge as a phenomena, right? So I thought it was fascinating to kind of build the company around that promise.
Yeah, no doubt. And so remind us when you created, what year was it when you created Oteemo?
In late 2014, and the operation started in 2015. So we have been in existence for about 7 years now.
So you passed some of the valley of death, right? So that's good, because I have so many friends talking about being an entrepreneur all day, but all they do is talk about it. You mentioned you don't want to have regrets. It's funny how some people, I'll go right into being an entrepreneur, like me, I guess, when I was 15, and some people wait a little bit, build some good experience, and go into it like you did. And some people just talk about it all day until they never do it ever, and just pretend they would be great at it. They talk about it all the time, and it's just nothing ever happens. So I'm glad you're on the second category, because I think it's probably the most successful ones. So that's pretty cool to see. So when you created Oteemo, you mentioned kind of what your thoughts were back then. What changed in the last, what is it now, 8 years, 7 years since this happened?
So I can answer it from both perspectives. A lot has changed from where the industry is today and what is the art of the possible. From the lens of, like, nothing really has changed, because organizations are still talking about things that we were talking 7 years ago. And sometimes it's like, it's an opportunity, but also, truly, I don't want to call it a problem, but better late than never, right? Some organizations were a little late in terms of adopting and truly saying that, hey, we need to be in this journey and we need to have adopted this a few years ago. So from that standpoint, I'm like, look, it's better late than never. But when we were about to start Oteemo in 2015, I think cloud and Agile were kind of like the biggest phenomena. DevOps was about to take off. And the way I was looking at the industry trends were that containers were still kind of emerging technologies. If you think about all the architectures that were out there, Docker Swarm was there, Red Hat OpenShift was, under a different architecture, not container based as it is today.
Right.
There was Apache Mesos. There were so many technologies out there, and not many people were sure which way the industry was going to trend. And maybe because of the size we were at that point, we analyzed the market and said, look, open source Kubernetes is the bet that we have to make. And we invested a lot in CNCF. We had the right people at that time, so I made sure that I listened to the right people when they were suggesting their recommendations. And we thought Kubernetes was going to be the winner, and that led to just investing in that space. We were probably the very first companies to have both KCSP and KTP, which is Kubernetes Certified Services Provider, and the Kubernetes Training Partner designations from CNCF. And we had a very good relationship with CNCF. We were driving their training program in the market. We built our own training, not the hello world, but the real world implementations, and trained a lot of organizations on adoption of that technology. So at that point, the bet was that, look, virtualization was a game-changing phenomena, right? That is what transformed the client-server architectures that we had known before virtualizations into something amazing. And then I believed and still believe that at that point, containerization was where virtualization was in its infancy back in the day. So I think there is still a lot more to do, when it comes to these architectures. And, we think about things like AI, ML, edge compute. I think those were all concepts that were theoretical in nature, but they are a reality now because of, I personally think it's because of cloud native architectures, and that is what is making them reality now.
Yeah. So how did your discussions with customer change? I mean, you did mention the problems are very much the same. Many companies lagging behind and still struggling to catch up. But did anything change when it comes to the eagerness of companies to do the right thing, when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to realizing, hey, maybe we can't afford not to move at the pace of relevance if we want to compete in this modern world? Do we need to step up the game? Do you feel like the leadership is more eager to make it happen?
No, that's a great question, Nick. I do feel like there is interest and a lot of excitement in the leadership to transform their organizations, at least within the customer bases that we see. Most of the times, maybe this is a typical trend in business. When we talk about when would customers want to engage, an expert consultancy like ours, we usually look at what mode they are in when we have the conversation. It's either the pain mode or the growth mode, and the pain mode is, the systems are unreliable, they're always down, performance isn't there, business is losing confidence in IT, and this problem should have fixed yesterday, and I'm going to get fired if I don't fix it. Like, they are in super pain, and that's when everything becomes urgent and you got to fix it now, and everything becomes a priority. Very reactive in nature, right? Yeah. There are the other mode is what we call the growth mode, where it's more like, hey, we are going in this journey. This is important. It's not urgent, but if we don't do the right things now, it is going to be urgent down the road, and we are going to hurt, right? So they are thinking proactively, and there are few customers. If I have to segment, most of them usually end up in the pain mode, at least when we start interacting, and then our goal is to move them into the growth mode. But not to say that there aren't companies that are thinking this way. Even federal, like, P1 and U.S. Air Force and what we are doing, I think strategically thinking about, how we make those investments is basically in the growth mode. So I generally think the leadership realizes it, but unfortunately, sometimes until you get hurt, you don't really understand what is at stake, and that's just what we see, most of the times.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me how leaders that are supposed to lead are often way too reactive, and I would say they are more followers than they're leaders, right? But you see the pace of IT move faster than ever. I mean, you look at some of the technologies we're using on platform one, and in the DevSecOps stacks of most Fortune 500 now, most of these capabilities are barely a few years old. You talked about the CNCF and the Linux Foundation. I have to tell you, I'm a big fan of the team. I'm a big fan of both the CNCF teams and the Linux Foundation teams, and they've been able to really build a pretty significant set of training, certifications. Let's talk a little bit about learning and how to invest in people. I mean, most of the recommendations you would give as a CEO when you help your team learn and continuously learn. And I've been a big proponent of giving an hour a day to my people when I was in the Air Force to learn, because we find that not only we have to catch up many times, so we're behind, and so we need to spend the time to catch up, and then you want to be behind again, and so you end up having to continue to invest. And it's the days of sending people once a year to some training event or whatever are long past due, and so what you see now is learning platforms and curriculums and different things be more on a continuous basis. I spend a lot of time curating videos on YouTube from CNCF and others to push kind of the right unbiased training. My biggest issue was always, whether it's a Red Hat or VMware or pick your distro or cloud provider, they all have their bias for their products. In fact, if you look at the training of most of these products, it is very very much pushing a specific product. In fact, it's going to pretty much teach you how to get locked into that product very effectively. And yes, you may move fast, but people often forget about the technical debt and the cost of potentially having to swap down the road to a different product, or be more flexible, or have options and not be locked into a single option. Particularly important when you do embedded system. And the next Tuesday we're going to be talking about digital twin and how to bring DevSecOps to weapon systems. Obviously, you can afford to get locked into a cloud provider on some of these systems, not only because it's not going to work, but also because you want to have options. And I think it's particularly important when you're a government employee to protect the taxpayer and make sure we're not getting the taxpayer funding to to become this cash cow for some of these companies, and continuously having to double down good money after bad money. And so I guess my first, kind of broader question when it comes to the pace of IT is, what changed since, 8 years ago to today, when you look at the learning aspect and the continuous learning versus kind of snapshot learning in time, stuck in time, and do you also end up having to, when you hire new talent, how much do you have to spend on getting them up to speed? I mean, I'm sure you're trying to always find the best talent, but the fact is there's such a competition right now. It's probably very difficult to find the right talent already ready to go. I was seeing advertising on LinkedIn last week where a company was like, I don't care if you have any experience, we're gonna build it for you, and we're gonna help you get there, and we're gonna just get you from zero to a hero. That was interesting. I guess it must be pretty difficult to find people that are qualified nowadays. So I would assume something drastically changed just on the learning side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the biggest difference I feel like from the last decade to this one, or even the 2000s, and 2010 and onwards, is before it was very clear, the delineation between an application developer or a software engineer and the so-called systems administrators, right? And there was a little bit of automation on the system side, but DevOps pretty much changed the game there, right? Everyone is treated as an engineer. Everyone, everything should be treated as code. Is the principle that we've been hearing quite a bit, and I know you're a big fan of that. The whole everything as code construct, right? So I think in the last few years, as we were looking at what does DevOps and DevSecOps transformations mean, the cornerstone of everything is automation, right? So what we have seen is, if you take the spectrum of software engineers on one side and systems engineers on the other, that gap is being narrowed, right? Like, people that have been developers traditionally want to understand DevOps engineering. People that are systems engineers want to become full stack engineers. So I think everyone is an engineer is the mindset shift that is happening, in my opinion, because of how critical automation is, right? So with that said, like, continuously learning and keeping up to date on the latest and greatest frameworks that play a role in making things happen is pretty important, right? I mean, we can say that, hey, what are the 20% of technologies that you should definitely know that will make 80% of your impact, is a good way to look at it. And you can say, Ansible, or back in the day there was Puppet and Chef. I don't know where they are now, but so those things
slowly dying, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, we've heard quite a bit back in the day, not as much now. Python is the hottest tech right now. Go is picking up, right? So so I think that the amount of technologies people have options to learn have increased. And what is limited is the time. But in general, continuous learning, when people are joining Oteemo, one thing we tell our folks is, look, we will teach you skills, but we cannot teach you passion. You need to have the passion to learn, and then we'll provide all the support, right? And we have internally our programs and boot camps that our folks can go through the same training that we have available for our customers around Kubernetes SRE programs, or Kubernetes application developer programs are available for our people to take. And then we have investments in made for learning paths around SRE, DevSecOps engineers, cloud native application development engineers that take these best of the breed products that they can take time and invest into, right? So it's going to be a healthy balance of how do you find time versus when do you support your day jobs and your customers. And it always
do you give them some time?
So we do between between engagements, or on an annual basis, we are thinking about having at least 40 hours set aside. That is a discussion that we are trying to have, and most of the times, if we look at the math, people do have that much of time, and we are making sure that we have the infrastructure and the support systems in place to kind of drive that continuous learning forward.
Are you
On
are you using any kind of learning platform, learning hub, or are you just using your own content that you? I've been a big fan of the O'Reilly learning platform. I think it's like you know $50 or $60 per user per year. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's the price of 2 books, and you get unlimited access to all the O'Reilly books and all the cloud learning and all that stuff. And I've been lobbying a lot to convince O'Reilly and the Linux Foundation and CNCF to merge their content and do some type of a bundle, because I really believe it would be a killer learning product that would be less biased than most other products out there. Are you using anything, or are you just relying on the learning, the training you built, or what's the vision there?
Yeah. So we rely on both the things. We rely on our own internal training that we build, but also rely upon a cloud guru and their kind of cloud learning paths that were developed, and we kind of curate that for our folks. Subscription to O'Reilly is an interesting thing. I have to look into that and see how it makes sense, and if you like it, I would love to know more details on that, and I'm going to follow up on that and figure out whether access to that is going to help. Because
we bought about 60,000 or 70,000 seats for DoD.
Okay.
And unfortunately, with DoD, like everything else, people got the accounts and they don't use it, and then it's just sitting there, and then not other people can get in, and you have all these. So we had to kind of kick out people every 90 days or whatever. But I think in a smaller company, certainly it will be a completely different mindset. But also, it's a pretty insignificant, investment. We're talking $60 a year. That's like, when you compare to the cost of books and stuff, it's just a no-brainer. I was pretty shocked about and you get early access to some of the books. You get, the full cloud training. It's not just the books, right? So it's videos, it's training content. And we'll talk at some point, about the investment you're making, which I believe is pretty unique when it comes to certifications.
Yeah.
Look, most people try to get certifications, but the way you approach it is a little bit different. I was talking to another CEO. I'm not going to name him, but he was telling me, he has to pay significant bonuses for people to go and get the certification. You're already paying for the cost of the certification and the time to learn it, and now you have to pay for them to even want to take it. That to me was like if any of my people, should I have a company ever again, would tell me I have to pay them to want to learn, they would be fired the next day. It's just, I can't even imagine how you get there. But that tells you, I guess, people are not passionate. They're not. Some people are just taking these jobs. I remember having someone that just told me, hey, I'm doing this to make a living, and that's fine, right? But he also told me that he didn't have a device, a laptop at home. I was like, you want to be a developer? You have a device at home? Like, I never even heard of such a thing, So anyway, and Marjorie is here, and she's awesome, and she's from O'Reilly. So, and by the way, no one is paying me to say anything about O'Reilly. Just to be clear, I'm completely unbiased. I have no financial interest. You know that, but I just want to mention for the team. So I guess let's get back to the learning. So no portal yet, but I think you need to talk to Marjorie too. In terms of the velocity of learning, did you find it to require more? And I guess customers sometimes don't know what they don't know, and that's probably why DoD has a massive amount of developers and engineers that are not up to date, because we don't know they're not up to date because we don't have the technical expertise to even know they're not up to date. So we end up paying for someone the price of a normal regular engineer, but they're 10 years stuck in time. And like you mentioned, most service companies have a very tough time saying, hey, that person is in an engagement right now. So we're not gonna disrupt that, and we're not gonna have that person learn, and he needs to do is whatever number of hours he's supposed to be doing on that contract. And how do you break that toxic mindset? Because if you don't invest in your people, they're gonna leave. You're not bringing best value to your customers because they're getting subpar technical expertise and advice and recommendations. So you may end up losing the contract. Oh no, maybe you get away with it, right? But the fact is, it's probably not the best way to do business. You mentioned, trying to find time between engagements, but is there a path where you can find a way to invest during engagement? Is there such a discussion with the customer to say, hey, I understand you're paying those people, and just like you have to invest in your employee as DoD, civilians, and military people, maybe we also need to think about how do we invest in people on contract so they learn and don't get behind?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and the reason I think that question is extremely relevant is because on long running contracts, like things that run for over a year, the pace of technology and the pace at which things are changing is pretty drastic, right? So how do you keep up is the big question, and and that probably is the toughest part of some of the conversations we've had, not just on the federal side but also on the commercial side, is how do we make sure that continuous learning and our people are also upskilled and reskilled at the same time? But as a consultancy, our business model is such that we have to make sure that when our customers are thinking about it, we should have already done it, right? So that's the mindset we should have, and whatever we need to do to adjust and upskill our people to do that is something that we have to figure out. And that's a big challenge, having a conversation with a customer and saying that, hey, they are paying us for our services, and the perception that they're always going to have is that, hey, we don't want you to learn on our dime. You have to you have to be the experts, and that's a very tough conversation to have. Some people get it, some people don't. And
yeah, but how do you explain to them? I mean, I love to talk to some of these people to pick up their brain, because I would get it that, look, I don't want to pay, I don't know, more than maybe 10-15%, right, of the cost of learning. So let's say I'm paying, someone for 40 hours a week, whatever, right? Maybe 10% of that will be paid on my side of the deal. Yeah. The rest will be paid by you as a company. But it seems pretty short-sighted to say, hey, we're fine with people getting stuck in time. They also don't like when people rotate, because they lose the momentum and they lose the knowledge, and you have to train people to learn, to know all the stuff again that's going on. So I remember hating when service companies would come to me for Platform One work and other duty work and tell me, you know what, we're gonna just swap the best talent you got. We're gonna put you someone else, and usually not for someone better, right? And so that pisses me off. And they're like, well, we want to make sure they have a different experience, different roles. And I mean, well, Platform One is huge enough to find a different thing to do as Platform One. You don't need to go elsewhere, right? Might not be always true with other teams, but at least for us, I think that's was pretty fair. Yep. So how do we solve this? Because honestly, I don't think we have a future in DoD and a fighting chance to win against China and Russia if we don't figure this one out.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. And recently, I was having that same exact conversation with a customer, and the conversation kind of started off with us talking about the expertise that we have on the program, and why it is important. And without talking about us specifically, we were talking about just the broader ecosystem. And one of the things that the customer mentioned was, hey, when the same exact thing, when we lose, key people that we are looking for unicorns, and when we lose those key people, it becomes really hard. And the question that I threw back at that customer was, we should probably talk about why that key person wants to get out of the program, right? Because maybe we should talk about why they were engaged in that role in the first place, and are they being empowered in that role today to do the things that they were supposed to do, that they were promised that they will be doing, right? And most of the times that's what also happens, not all the time, but significant amount of times, is that the unicorns come in, and if they really like it, I had people that tell me that they are having a blast in some of the programs that we are doing, right? I think you know some of those people, and they enjoy that. They've learned a lot in that. They've grown as people. As long as that experience is there, good people never want to leave. I think when they get caught up in, for lack of a better word, BS politics, right, of the programs, that is when, in my opinion, they want out, and they want to go to a place where their skills can make a difference. And sometimes it's like they don't see how it is being, applied or making a difference. Maybe it is a two-part thing where, the leaders have to show them that, hey, their roles, they are making a difference and their impact is seen. Or, if they are not being impactful, and the reason for why they were hired is not what they are doing, then you got to have an open and honest conversation about it, right? Because you don't want a CNCF Kubernetes contributor that is like 10th in the list of contributions, and we bring him in, and then this person does, call support. Nothing, again, I don't want to diminish any role by any means, but that is not what they want to do, right? So sometimes we run into, things like that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So we talked about the learning piece and kind of the investment in learning. I was gonna ask you about certifications and what's been your take so far on that side of the house.
Yeah. So we do encourage our folks to go get certified. One of our corporate goals is to be known as a company that has the highest density of cloud native certified engineers. And I have, when you talk about would you judge someone's intellect level based on the number of certifications they have? Absolutely not, right? I mean, I think you and I both agree that just certifications themselves is not going to prove anything, but it does prove that you have invested time, you had the drive to go learn something new, and it establishes a baseline within the organization in terms of that learning journey someone has to take. So we want to be known as that organization that invests in that continuous learning, and want to be known as the highest density cloud native engineering company. Most of our folks have a path to go towards basic cloud certifications, but also CKA, CKAD, and CKS are the three certs that everyone has an eye on.
Can you spell them so people know what they are?
Yeah. So Kubernetes certified administrator cert, and then the application developer cert for Kubernetes, and then the security cert for Kubernetes, right? And those things are pretty important within the ecosystem of work that we do, and pretty much every employee, every consultant within Oteemo has a goal to achieve one of those in a set amount of time. Now, are we going to go crazy if someone doesn't achieve that in whatever goal we have set? No, as long as the justification is reasonable, right? Because doing that while working on customer engagement, some people do it well, some people don't. Some people just have that innate the passion to just go and just open a laptop and continue learning in the middle of the night. You see that in some people, and those are the ones that end up getting whatever they want to get, regardless of what constraints you have, right? So, but having said that, we encourage that quite a bit. We celebrate those successes within the organization, and And one thing that we talk within Oteemo is it's all about the promotion, and what you do is based on what you bring to the table. It's not how many years you've been with us. It's a truly meritocracy based organization. Certs do play a role, but have we not promoted people that have not had certs? Not necessarily, but leaders at that level, most of our folks have proven that it is important, and they have led by example. So.
Yeah, and so just to remind everybody the names, right? So we have the certified Kubernetes administrator, CKA. We have the certified Kubernetes application developer, CKAD. And we have the certified Kubernetes security specialist, which is CKS. Yep. And I believe there is also something called the Kubernetes and Cloud Native Associate, but I'm not sure how good that one is. But tell you the first top three. Not only what I like with those certifications is that you can just cheat your way in, and you can just read a couple of books and pretend you know the subject matter, like CSSP or CEH or any of these cyber related certifications, Security Plus, Network Plus, all of these are all the same. Kind of if you can learn, if you can read a book and you can remember what the book says, you can get those certificates. Versus these are hands-on, real engagements, and I find them to be very deep and very technical. There's also for Service Mesh now. T-Trade launched their Istio and Envoy certifications. They're very complex, very difficult. In fact, might be too difficult to get. But for people moving to the next generation of Service Mesh, I think it's pretty important to think about how to get to that next level Service Mesh layer kind of expertise. And Envoy is pretty complex and pretty difficult on as a reverse proxy for Istio, and then Istio has also its own control plane and a set of pretty complex CLDs and things. So and I put on the screen for people that have not seen it before. What happens if we invest in developing our people and they leave us? Well, what happens if we don't and they stay? Right? It's a pretty famous one, but I think it's pretty good. I think unfortunately, I would argue most CEO would not answer that right now. I think they would just be more like a CFO. So how do we make those CEOs be more like that CEO on the screen? I think is through education and training, but I think they need to understand also that you shoot yourself in the foot. Sure, you're paying for a company to provide a service to you, but those that service is people, and people are human, and people need to learn, and people you need to invest in them to get them where you want them to be and stay at. And if you can't do that, then maybe you shouldn't be in the business of being managing people, right?
Absolutely. And related to that, Nick, the learning element is so important. And there are two other things that I believe, and we talk about this within Oteemo as the three ingredients that will make a big difference as to why your people can stay with you. Is the learning piece is extremely important, and then tied to that is the growth piece, right? Like people, as they're learning, as they're proving themselves, do they have a professional growth trajectory? Are they improving year over year, new opportunities, bigger, better things, and proportionate pay, right? And then besides those two, it's about, are we working with good people and having a good time, right? Because even if those two exist and then you are only dealing with a-holes all the time, then it is also a very tough justification to make to stick with that organization. So we strive to provide that culture where those three ingredients are in balance and are available at all times. And just being open about those has always helped.
So how do you compete against all these service companies that probably, for the largest one, like Red Hat and others, selling also now Red Hat consulting services and so on, VMware, Pivotal, whatever, right? And of course, the bigger guys. How do you get to compete? What makes you able to find the right talent?
Yeah, no, great question. And we have hired people out of all the big companies that you've mentioned, and we have had sometimes folks that came to us and said, "Hey, I got offers from the Facebooks of the world, Googles of the world, and I'm really having a tough time deciding." And in a way, even if they do, sometimes not everyone joins Oteemo, and I get it. We are not up there just yet. But the fact that you are even thinking that it is a tough decision, makes us feel good, right? On the other side, we have hired people that have been, at Facebook, at Google, Red Hat, and just all the good companies that we know. And most of the times, it's people trying to do something different and work on something more impactful and a better role that can make a difference. And as part of an organization, maybe it is the size at which we are and the pace at which we are growing. The journey and the role that they can take in based on where we are and where we are going, kind of excites them, right? And most of the times, our candidate experience process that we have during the interviews, we put a lot of effort into that. Jasmine, our lead recruiter, is an amazing human being, and she does a lot to kind of help drive that candidate experience. For the candidates that are just talking about joining Oteemo, right? So I think it always starts with that, right? The interviews are more conversational, but that is not to say we just chit chat, right? We truly want to see if there is a mutual fit, and I'm very deliberate about saying that, look, this is not just about whether you are a fit for Oteemo. This is also about whether Oteemo is a fit for you. So very transparent about our business model, where we are in the journey, and then giving them the opportunity to ask questions and saying, this is what we do. And I tell them that, look, I'll be lying if I tell you we are the perfect company in the whole world, right? We have our fair share of problems, but what makes us different is we don't fall for the same reason. And if we fall back, we get up pretty quickly, and we are pretty resilient about it, right? And the culture is such that we help each other out and have a good time. And most of the times, people, it's not about just the tech or the big name. It's about the experience they have during the interview process that makes a big difference, in my opinion.
And how much do you see now with COVID and all that stuff going on? Any change when it comes to people wanting to be, virtual versus on-site? Obviously, back in the day, I hated it, all of it. But people were, in love with ping pong tables and all that nonsense. I'm like, this is just completely ridiculous in my opinion. But particularly when you start going crazy about it, right? I don't mind one ping pong table or whatever, but some people were like, look at the Facebook and Google of the world. They lost their puppy minds. And they kind of live in this virtual parallel universe, just like the nonsense you see with, Facebook pushing that meta nonsense. It's like people now are going to live in virtual reality because they can't handle what's going on in the real world. It's just a very scary. I just despise all of it. I use VR for like flight learning and flight simulation, and it's great, and you want to use it when it makes sense, but it doesn't replace me going to fly my actual plane and enjoy it in real life, right? So what changed, I guess, when it comes to COVID and the way you do interviews or the way people want to work now?
Yeah, I think when COVID hit a couple of years ago, for tech companies, I think I have to say this, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but it has been kind of like a blessing in disguise, in the sense of like, you don't have to worry about where they are located, right? And that kind of opened up the doors for, our organization and many organizations like us to find talent regardless of where they are located, geographically. As long as they are in the continental United States, we could hire them, right? And that definitely helped identify talent. And because everyone is remote, it also helps. And what I'm not a big fan of, and this has been pre-COVID also, is a few people being remote and then a few being on-site is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. The reason this has worked is because everyone was remote, and it kind of evens out the playing field, right? So that definitely helps. And over the last 2 years, we have hired a lot of amazing talent across the country, and so did many other organizations. And that also opened up doors for candidates, right? They could they can go work for pretty much any company that is hiring right now because everyone is remote, so-called remote. But I think we are seeing a slow shift in that trend that is kind of about almost started, I would say, where organizations are talking about the hybrid model this year. And we are thinking about what that would mean for the workforce. And you will always have these companies that have promised lifelong work remote, promises, which in my opinion cannot stand, because if you're always remote, the innovation is going to slow down, right? Like, you've got to have those in-person interactions, because you don't say, let's set up a Zoom call only to innovate. I mean, it just doesn't happen. That's why Google is calling everyone back, right? At least in some capacity. So it'll be interesting. We are working with our customers to truly understand, what they would like to see, and why that is important, and if there is a healthy balance. Because if you are an organization that just mandates 4 days or 5 days, you're doomed to fail now, right? So I think it's more of a happy medium that we have to strike and explain, to our employees and our customers what the right thing to do and how we can balance this out as that transition is happening. So
and I just don't believe that companies can completely be 100% remote and be successful. I mean, if you have turnover and you have new people, if you have an existing rapport, I remember when this happened, most of the Pentagon ended up going remote, and when people, and I knew the people I was working with, and you can be remote a little bit, but then there was a few people leaving and being replaced, and now you're like, well, I don't know you, and now you don't have that rapport, and you don't have a way to build it. You don't have a, between meetings, you can't chit chat and do anything, to build that rapport, and then people end up effectively being strangers in the same organization. And look, sure, you can do some events and you can do these games, like I know Defense Unicorn is using this, forgot the name of it, Genter, whatever the name is, Gather, to have these virtual world. And you can do events once a year, twice a year, whatever, once a month, whatever, right? And you're saving a bunch of money in real estate, right? Not having an office or whatnot, which is fine. But I just don't know to what degree it scales, particularly with a large organization, particularly when you start doing innovation, particularly when that innovation is starting to touch some hardware and some physical thing. I think it's fine when you just do software, but you look at Microsoft with HoloLens and all these Kinect and all these physical / software innovations. You couldn't build HoloLens tomorrow and not have a place where you go and innovate and build that hardware / software experience. It can be done in a vacuum, and you might get away for a little while, but I don't think it would stick for very long. So I think you're right. So we talked a little bit about learning and all that. We talked about the certifications that we've been you and I guess also pushing for. Tell us a little bit about when you have an engagement with a new customer that's trying to get into DevSecOps. Of course, they mostly don't likely know what that even means, but assuming they know what DevSecOps is, and how do you accelerate and what kind of concepts or tools or existing things you have to accelerate the journey of a medium, large size organization to DevSecOps?
Great. Yeah. So I'll answer for the commercial side of things and what we see on the commercial side, and there are some similarities on the federal side. When we engage with a customer, the first thing that we ask for is to do a strategy engagement, which involves, doing a current state assessment, and then understanding within our maturity model. So we have built maturity models for DevSecOps and the 6 core functions of DevSecOps, which I'll touch upon in a second, and where they want to be, in terms of their goals and their business. Because one thing that we try and tell people is, you don't have to be a Netflix, right? If you are in, a lab testing, processing, business, don't worry about being a Netflix, right? So we have to be realistic about what the business needs are and understand what we need from a technology standpoint for that. And then basically build a roadmap and a plan and an implementation plan that will get them to that holy grail state. And now it's not a big bang approach. So once we develop that blueprint upfront,
and by big bang you don't mean platform one big bang, you just mean
I don't mean platform one big bang. Thank you for correcting me. Yes,
it's not a one big drop.
Yes.
Thing. Yeah. You can't use that saying anymore. No more.
I have to find another word to use now. So once we develop that blueprint, it forms the foundation for what our plan is going to now rely upon. And the next immediate step is to take what we call a proof of value. And a proof of value is nothing but a vertical slice of a customer journey, if you think about, that touches on all the aspects of how the customer interacts with that piece of software, where that software is running, on what infrastructure, how is that infrastructure managed, how are the pipelines for that infrastructure managed. So it's kind of like a vertical slice that cuts across, your entire stack, right? So we're not trying to completely change a big monolithic application all at once. We want to keep it a bit controlled. And that is the proof of value. It's not a proof of concept where you just quickly code something and throw it away. It is a proof of value. And the idea is, we have to generate that value after that engagement. And, the way we want to scope that in the spirit of Agile is, we want to showcase that value within 3 months. In a quarter, we have to have a deployable, entity in production for that customer. Now, some customers may or may not have, based on regulations and processes and compliance rules, that faster deployment times. But that is what we strive for. And then from there, it's about scaling that operation across the enterprise. Now, the 6 functions that I talked about that form our functional model for DevSecOps are Agile, which is the methodology with which we operate, right? Infrastructure, which is infrastructure automation, whether it is cloud, public, private, doesn't matter. It's infrastructure automation. Release engineering, you can call it like CI/CD is a big part of it, but that is not all of release engineering. So release engineering is a function in itself, in our opinion. Test automation is another big one, and I'll tell you why. Most in our experience, what we've seen is in the drive to get to continuous delivery, every time we have really awesome software supply chains built, with latest and greatest technologies, the bottleneck always has been in testing, most of the times, in our experience. And the reason is, most of the testing, for whether it's infrastructure, environments, or applications themselves, has always been mostly manual, right? And also test coverage has been something that people have not paid much attention to. So we emphasize that quite a bit as to how you can focus on improving your test automation footprint, not just for application, but your infrastructure and environment, so that the promise of continuous delivery can be realized. So after test automation, it's continuous monitoring and observability, and then culture and collaboration. So when we look at these 6 things, we go through all those 6 within the organization and provide that CIO or that IT leader with a pretty comprehensive report on where they stand today, and very concrete recommendations on what they need to do to get to where they want to go. And that's a typical, engagement model, if that makes sense, Nick.
Yeah, no, that's very good. So are you using any tools? I'm giving you a hint on
Yeah.
the Big Bang. Are you giving anything to accelerate that actual delivery?
Yeah. So one of the tools that we have started to develop, and I'm excited to announce here today, is the DoD DevSecOps Reference Design Assessment Accelerator. And what I mean by that is, you have spearheaded the DoD DevSecOps transformation, and the reference implementation guide that is out there is an amazing document that programs can look at and follow to comply with all the best practices that are captured in that reference guide, right? So what we have done is, we understand that DoD is in its journey to drive and adopt DevSecOps and make sure that programs are adopting DevSecOps the right way. So we have taken the DoD DevSecOps reference design, and thanks to all the help from you, we have created an assessment tool which is completely automated, and we are calling it Argus. And what it does is, it is a rapid assessment tool to see, if your program, if you're in DoD, if your program adheres to the DevSecOps reference design. If not, we will tell you where the gaps are and what you need to do to get in compliance with the reference design, the DoD DevSecOps reference design. So it's an extensive list of questions across all the categories that we have distilled down from the reference design, and usually takes no more than a day if the right people are available, to go through that interview process and give us the information. It's a set of guided questions, and then immediately you know exactly where you stand. Now, would you have a very detailed implementation plan? That's a conversation we can have, but at least you will know very quickly now, without spending weeks and months. Like in a day, you will know where you stand against the DoD DevSecOps reference design.
Yeah, so effectively, right, the vision is to have an assessment tool, right, that's not that's driven through a series of questions that you ask the team to identify kind of the maturity posture of the organization when it comes to DevSecOps through all the requirements of the DoD Enterprise DevSecOps Reference Design version 2.1, and that gives you a mapping of the gaps. And more importantly, I believe it also gives you a prioritization of the gaps, so you can know what to do next. Because the issue with most assessments, if you go and pay a Deloitte quite a bit of money to do an assessment, you're going to get a 150-page report. But what you often don't get very clearly is kind of a prioritization of those gaps. We had the same kind of vision on the cyber side of the NIST controls, and if you get a grade and you get an F, and every of the 16 cyber capabilities categories is a a C minus or an F or whatever, how does that help you then prioritize the right focus of what you're going to be fixing? Well, with this capability, right, I believe the vision is to also give them a report of kind of based on the weighted impact and the maturity of the existing stack versus what you need to get fully compliant. It will tell you exactly which capability you want to focus on for the next 2-3 months, and then you guys can go and make a bunch of money selling the implementation of it and the plan of that implementation. Is that kind of a good summary of what this is about?
I think I should take your spot. You should take mine. I think you did a pretty good job of elaborating that. And I think two things to note there in what you said were the weighted, the weights that are given to the questions, and why certain recommendations are going to be more important than the way they are. And then the plotting between the value and the level of effort, right? So based on, if there is a high value, low level of effort implementation recommendation, we want you to do that. So we are going to kind of plot all that out as part of this assessment very quickly.
And so, what's the vision for the assessment, right? For organizations that want to try to do this, how do they? Is there a website up and running yet, or something where they can go and ask? And what's the cost? How do you do those engagements with organizations?
Yes, we do have a website link, Nick. Let me just share that.
Yeah, and I'm sure someone in your team will probably post into the comment.
Yeah.
Right here. Okay, so I'll put the link on the chat for people.
Yeah, and
how do they reach out to you, and what's the how much?
Yeah,
how much
there is a contact us form there. If you have your information, put your information there. We pretty much reach back in the same day, and we'll figure out how quickly we want to have the conversation, and then go from there. If you are already, this specifically is testing your compliance against the DoD DevSecOps reference design. So one might say this is only applicable for federal organizations that are trying to move towards that.
Yes and no, right? Because I know dozens of financial companies.
Exactly. Right. But it is not necessarily true that it wouldn't apply for a highly regulated organization that is in the financial services arena or healthcare. So
I would argue it applies to everybody,
exactly.
But I'm biased because I created it. So, but I think the DevSecOps reference design is really being used by other nations, by dozens of financial healthcare, retail, banking, you name it, organizations. So I don't see why people would care. And just what's the price? How does this work in time? Okay, so they can reach out on the website, and I see you put the most beautiful part of that website is a beautiful picture of me. So that's nice. But I'm just kidding. And other than that, what's the pricing model? How do you sell that assessment?
So because it is a very quick turnaround, we want to do that in no more than 2 days. If, like I said, if people are available, we can even do that in a day and get the report on the very next day. So it's not going to be super expensive. Our goal is to not make it, a 6-digit deal just to do this assessment. So it'll be, right. In the words of the government federal speak, it's going to be a micro purchase. Specifics of how much will really depend on where the conversations are going to go and what next steps would mean, but it is not going to break the bank. It is going to any organization, small, medium, large, should be able to fit this into their budget is my goal, to make this tool available, right? It is more about, hey, let's have a good conversation about where you stand and what the art of the possible can be, right? That's what the fun is. So our goal is to not to make this, an ultra expensive endeavor for anyone.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is so many organizations are asking me, how are they doing in implementing DevSecOps, and now I know where to send them, because honestly, there's just nothing like this that I know of where you can easily assess your gaps and more importantly get what to do next, because there's nothing I hate more than assessment that just tell you have a bunch of problems and now you have no answer on how to fix it.
Exactly.
And this covers, from what I see on the website, I guess is covers the entire reference design, including all the GitOps and CI/CD requirements, the testing, the assessments, and so it's pretty holistic, right?
It is. It covers all the categories that exist today in the reference design as it stands, and we have also taken, just a few, that we think we have asked and had success in the past and made it, part of the questionnaire. But it is pretty comprehensive, and it covers everything that that is laid out in the reference design.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So now, when it comes to other accelerators, what have you seen other than your own crap? Sorry, but not crap, but products. What do you
So
see
you
as?
have time.
It's just a way of saying it. You own, you're biased, obviously, when it comes to your products. That's what it is. But
Mhm.
what else have you seen? Whether from open source or platform on work or whatever, right? That you've been kind of reusing, or at least proposing to your customers to reuse inside of those engagements.
Yeah, one of the things that we have been helping organizations with, just based on our experience and understanding of Platform One, is helping drive these commercial product companies that want to transact in the DoD and want to be in the Iron Bank,
Mm-hmm.
accelerate their journey into the Iron Bank. And the reason that is important is,
Let's just
when
tell people, for people that don't know. I mean, that might be rare, but Iron Bank is the DoD container registry where companies and open source products can get accredited for DoD wide use, and all the way to classified environments. So for companies to if they want to do business with DoD, getting approved and accredited on Iron Bank is going to be a big acceleration of that. So companies, I believe, can come to you instead of them doing it and have to struggle with understanding all the DoD nonsense and all that work. They can, as a commercial entity, they can come to Oteemo and say, "Hey, help me harden and get my containers ready for DoD use," which is more than DoD now because we have 12 agencies and 5 nations outside of DoD using it. But effectively, it's kind of a hardened version of their containers, right? That they can put there and then sell the licenses and stuff separately. But you guys do this as a service now, right?
it is, yes, yeah, yes, Nick. So the idea is that help if we help these technology product companies get all the way from until the last mile before they get to Iron Bank and harden their containers and get them to a state where they can be deployed and go through all the checks and balances very efficiently once they submit their application, right? Is the goal. So we'll take you to the last mile, and then you can work with the actual Iron Bank team on getting your product in, and the chances are going to be pretty high. We have done it successfully for many organizations, and I think I can only publicly talk about JFrog, which everyone knows about them and their product, and they have given a public shout out to us, for helping them in their journey on LinkedIn. So we have helped companies like that get efficiently into Iron Bank, and that is an accelerator service. And the reason I think that also helps the government is that if this product company is spending their money to get their readiness efficiently, you don't have to spend cycles once they are submitted. Like, the teams here can just be efficient in managing and running things and work on high value tasks, not worry about taking something from day one and just spending cycles at a taxpayer's expense to get a product into Iron Bank, right? So that's the model and the value prop that we have been talking about, is how do we do this efficiently so that we are efficient across the spectrum, right? So it has been working pretty well.
And I know you probably can't give a number because it's probably not a fixed number, but what can companies expect for a single container? What kind of, I guess you have to see the results of the scans, and how do you deal with the pricing of hardening and getting a container approved on Iron Bank? How does that work? Do you start with some type of discovery phase, or how does this work?
Yeah. We always start with the discovery phase to know where they stand today and how many vulnerabilities or what they have. Sometimes they run as containers, they're just not hardened. Sometimes they're not even containerized. Just figuring that out and putting a plan in place, understanding the level of effort is what kind of drives that forward. So we have two flavors of how we can engage with organizations. One is, we'll do the discovery, we'll tell you kind of what you need to do, and then we can provide advisory type service where we are not hands-on keyboard, containerizing and hardening your product, because some companies they pride themselves in having the best of the breed technical engineering talent out there, so they want their teams to kind of drive that forward. So in that case, we are engaged more as advisors. In other cases, we just end up becoming part of their team in this journey, and help lead that effort and containerize, harden, and make sure their containers are ready for consumption into Iron Bank. So there is no one number. It's very, very, very hard to put a number out there, Nick. But again, it has not been a 7-digit deal ever. So it's pretty small investment if you're thinking about getting into DoD and driving your revenues forward, right? So
it's not much cheaper than what you will see with FedRAMP, right? So
lots cheaper than that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the average, I believe, for FedRAMP is $1 million. So more than 6 digits, right? So
exactly. It's a fraction of that.
Right. So what else have you used for that acceleration? You talk about Iron Bank. You talk about the assessment piece. Is there anything else you've been using?
Yeah. One of the big things that we've been using as our cloud native accelerator, and I believe other organizations, if they have to get an edge, should also do that. And I know some companies are doing it. Is getting a flavor of the Kubernetes and CNCF, that reference architecture and that ecosystem, up and running quickly, because we are seeing a lot of organizations moving towards containerization architectures, and Kubernetes is going to form the foundation. Now, do you always have to start from ground zero for everyone? Not necessarily, because when we engage, if we want to bring that automation and that framework for bringing a baseline version, production grade CNCF, like Kubernetes ecosystem. And when I say Kubernetes, it's not just barebone Kubernetes, but all the required tooling around release engineering, service mesh, and all that good stuff. Pretty much in sprint 1, right? Sprint 0 is your kind of design sprint, but sprint 1 is you just get it up and running. Now, having said that, every organization is different. Every one software factory is different. So you have to. We end up spending time with our customers on customizing, these implementations from there on. But getting something up and running in an AWS, whether it is public AWS commercial, GovCloud, C2S, Azure, air-gapped. We have accelerators for all those. So we have done that successfully, and even built portable implementations where there is a use case. And I think I can talk openly about it. Telos has Exacta as their flagship product, which is a phenomenal product being used in DoD and across federal government. And we partnered with them in helping build that deployment architecture, portable deployment architecture across a multi-cloud, DevSecOps platform. So that's one of the accelerators.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So we talked about accelerators. We talked about training and learning. We talked about certifications. What kind of advice you have for teams that are kind of struggling with DevSecOps and are trying to get where they want to be? What do you, other than call Oteemo, what other recommendations would you have?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, Nick, is these enterprise initiatives like DevSecOps or agile transformations fail not because someone has picked the wrong technology. I think we all have the same access to technologies and the same ingredients, but how one organization creates that recipe, and that tastes very differently than other organizations. And the reason is, I think it all starts from the leadership, in my opinion. Most of the times what we've seen is leadership pretty much delegating down and saying, go do DevOps, right? Okay, what does that mean? If everyone is saying go do DevOps, who knows what the the goals are. So I think it's pretty important to understand what it is that we are trying to achieve, and if leaders can be very vocal about here are the 5 KPIs or OKRs, whatever you use within your organization that we are going to achieve in this amount of time, that establishes clarity across the organization and alignment, right? Because that is, in my opinion, a big missing piece in many organizations is lack of what we are trying to do. Because I hear people when we talk about even agile, right? Everyone is trying to do agile. The question is, are you being agile, right? So I know how you feel about SAFe, Nick. We don't have to go there, but doing agile is what puts us into these situations of failures, right? But if the idea is about being agile, you are having a very different conversation. So I think it's about, if there's one thing I would want people to take from what will drive successful DevSecOps and agile transformations is understanding what the goals are, what we are trying to achieve, be very specific about what the automation goals are, because chances are you already have the right technologies. You're probably learning it the right way. But if you understand the goals, there is a pretty good chance you'll be able to hit that.
Yeah, that's spot on. And we should go into SAFe, but maybe another time. I know Brian Finster has had a pretty amazing engagement this week again about SAFe, and he had a pretty healthy debate with someone from the SAFe community, trying to convince him otherwise. But I'm pretty sure Brian won the debate. But I'm biased because I was already rooting for him. So, all right. So, what do we have from the public? Let's see. So on Twitter, someone was asking about if you guys are hiring and what kind of role you guys are looking for.
Yeah. We are hiring. Actually, we are on a hiring spree. We are looking for people that have expertise and experience doing DevSecOps transformations, cloud native implementations. If you already have those skills and you want to be part of a culture like ours, happy to have a conversation. We are also looking for people that have the passion. You may not have the entire breadth of experience, and all the buzzwords in your resume, but if you have the passion and you can learn quickly, we always have conversations with those types of people. And like I said, passion, we cannot teach. Skills we will teach, but there are some specific open roles that we are definitely looking to hire pretty aggressively, Nick. And most of them fall into the domains of release engineering, CI/CD. Cloud is the lowest common denominator. That experience, mostly everyone at this point probably has it. But and then Kubernetes, container architectures. If you have played with it, happy to have a conversation. If you're a TS cleared or secret cleared, definitely, because I know those are skills that are even harder to find. But if anyone has those clearances, great. But these are also for our commercial customers.
So, what's your ratio right now between commercial engagement and government engagements?
Yeah, between commercial and federal, it's about 40 to 60%, Nick. And
of which one? Sorry.
40% is commercial and 60% is federal.
Okay, that's pretty healthy.
Yeah, it is healthy, and the good thing is even between the commercial and federal, we have a pretty decent diversification between accounts. So yeah, it's luckily pretty well diversified.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And so, would you say right now the biggest demand you have for new talent is it more about people on the commercial side or people on the government side? And in which case, do you usually need a clearance for people that need to do government work, or what's the requirement, I guess, for on the clearance side?
Yeah. The needs are I would say currently a little more on the federal side, and if we already have clearances, that is what we are looking for, or and it is the same skills that we talked about: Kubernetes, release engineering, CI/CD. If you have done DevOps projects and programs, we would love to have a conversation, because the pace at which we do these things could be very different. But that's going to be a good start. On the commercial side, we do have similar needs, but I think it is not as, I would say, urgent as it is right now for federal.
And you're helping organizations across the government, not just the DoD, right?
Yes, Nick. It's not just the DoD. We are at CMS, we are at FDIC, we are at VA, and we have done a lot of work with other civilian organizations in the past. Yes, we are at Army ECMA, doing some work. But I think Air Force is definitely one of our largest flagship accounts, Nick. And our hope and goal is to take what we have built and been part of, right, in building some amazing platforms and solutions at Platform One, Ski Camp, under the Lightning Project, and other cyber implementations that we have been part of, and take that to the rest of the DoD and the federal government, because the DevSecOps movement is real. I think everyone is wanting to see the art of the possible and make it happen. So we would love to be part of that journey and help accelerate that journey for these organizations.
That's very cool. All right, the other question I got from the audience on Twitter this time is about kind of your vision when it comes to the learning, and I guess she was asking, and I'm trying to rephrase it because it's not perfect English, but she was asking what you think is the most impactful certification for a full stack engineer.
For a full stack engineer, I think based on what lens you look at it from, I believe that if you are a full stack engineer, based on where you started, your journey as an engineer, I would say it's either CKA or CKAD, and the reason is, if you have been a systems engineer and you understand administration quite well, but you are trying to become a well-rounded full stack engineer, go get a CKAD, and that can create some well-roundedness. If you have been an application developer, and this has happened within Oteemo, and I'm speaking from experience, seeing our people kind of become well-rounded. If you are an application developer and you want to understand the system side of it, go for CKAD. So go for things that you did not have within the spectrum based on where you started and what your biases were. And then I would say the cherry on top is the CKS, because that is a pretty hard cert. And a few of our folks have gotten it, and that just it teaches you a lot, right? So if there is, but the question was, I think, for one cert, so that would be my answer.
Yep. No, that's good. All right, I think this is the last question that we got here. So let's get ready for the last one. Now I'll give you the last word, and then I'll remind everybody of the next dates and who is coming on the show. Okay. So I guess you won't be the last words, because I'm going to remind everybody of what's next. So, but you'll be the last meaningful words. So, when it comes to culture, what do you think are the most impactful way to spread the agile DevSecOps culture mindset across a large organization? That's an easy question.
Yeah. So I think, like I said, the most important thing is it starts from the leadership and talking about what we want to achieve as an organization and why DevSecOps and Agile is important. The why forms the basis for everything, right? And then, I believe that the focus should be more on how can we be agile. Don't just focus on doing agile. And that is the trap that we see people and enterprises, large enterprises fall. They take the agile manifesto, and it was done brilliantly because a set of high performing engineers came together and they built that. Now every 5,000 person organization is not reflective of that team, right? So that is where everything falls apart, right? So I think just making sure that understand that it is a framework, and we are going to make adjustments to the framework to fit our organization, or we have to adjust to make changes to our organization to fit that framework, is the approach you got to take, right? And we can go on and on into all the principles and blameless postmortems and all that good stuff, but I think just having that clarity up front and saying that here are the adjustments we need to make, because don't try to fit a square peg into a round hole. That is what always happens when it comes to these transformations.
Ah, that's a pretty good. And I guess we have one last question from the chat here, so if you don't mind taking it. This is obviously I believe that's going to be a tough answer, but Wahid was asking about H-1B candidates and how open is the door at Oteemo. I assume because of the government requirements, you cannot take non-U.S. citizens, but I'm not going to answer the question for you. But
no, nothing is from a compliance standpoint stopping us from accepting H-1B candidates and sponsoring H-1Bs. It's just that as an organization, we don't sponsor H-1Bs today. And that was a decision we made a few years ago, just based on some sort of uncertainties that were happening around immigration. But we are revisiting that because there is an immense talent pool of H-1B immigrant workers that is out there that can be tapped into, right? And I would love to have opportunities to work with people from that pool. But as an organization, we just aren't there yet in terms of sponsoring and taking that process on, at least where we are now. But that is not to say it will not change. So I would say Wahid, hit us up probably towards the end of Q2, maybe Q3 timeframe. Things may change, but if you are in touch with Jasmine or anyone from our organization, we'll make sure we keep you posted.
Awesome. And I always end before my little speech and letting you also give your last words. Always end with a fun question. So I was going to ask you, since you're an immigrant like me, how do you find that the Indian population, I guess, is really so active and pretty much taking over, I would say, all of the senior roles in IT. I mean, I just, all my friends, right, are in C-level roles, in organizations from a Microsoft to whatever, right, and are all Indians. So how did you guys make that happen? It seems like pretty amazing.
That's a great question, Nick. Good observation, I guess. But I want to quote. I don't know if you've seen Hamilton, the show, and I think in the song there is a verse in the song that Hamilton says, right? It goes like, immigrants, we get the job done, right?
Right.
And that it just cracks me up. But anyways, look, I think
although I don't see French guys in as a CEO of Microsoft, but.
No, but
why Indians more than, are you a hard worker? What's
it is definitely just when I was in college and the way we were reading and learning and doing things back in the day. I think it's definitely hard work comes as part of the package. Otherwise you'll get whipped at home. So you got to do it. But engineering and the affinity to engineering and computer science and in computer engineering has been a big phenomenon when I was in college and a few years from before that. And that is kind of, I believe, the fruits of that, investments that were made back in the country, in the cities then, and that affinity towards computer science and engineering is what we are seeing now. Now we can argue that, hey, you can just be engineers. How are you becoming entrepreneurs? Now that I don't know, honestly. I have to think about it. But I do want to say that, it's one thing to say, this demographic is doing all these amazing things, but I feel like, if it were any other country, this would not have been possible, in my opinion. At least, if I reflect my journey and my story, I spent half my life here, and this is home, other than the home that I grew up in. And these opportunities wouldn't be available, in my opinion, in any other country. So, I think credit needs to be given to the nation that provides these opportunities, right? And it's truly a land of opportunity.
Right. No doubt. Yep. Love it. And also, with French people, they would only work 35 hours, so that wouldn't work out. So maybe there's that. I don't know. All right. So I'm going to give you the last words, and then I'll remind everybody of the next shows coming up. So over to you.
No, this has been amazing conversation, Nick. Thanks for, giving me the opportunity again. Super honored. And, like I said, we are on an amazing journey to help, organizations that are willing to work with us, accelerate and kind of drive their adoption of digital engineering. So if you want to continue the conversation, reach out to me, LinkedIn, Twitter, email, raja@oteemo.com, and we'll chat.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy, and wanted to thank you for joining the show. Wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. This was fun. So the next episode on next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, will be with the team of the Digital Transformation Office of the Air Force and Space Force to talk about how they are implementing and helping implement modeling and simulation and digital twin capabilities to the Department of Defense and weapon systems. And that's going to be Tuesday 22nd. Tuesday 29th, we have my dear friend John Olson, General John Olson, will be joining as the first Chief Data and AI Officer of the Air Force and Space Force. So the 29th at 1 p.m. And on the 12th, I'll keep that. I'll keep the next two secret for now, because I have a couple of pretty interesting guests coming up, a little bit outside of the comfort zone of normal DoD discussions. One is a congressman, and one is I guess former DoD that made quite a bit of noise when he resigned. So that's going to be fun too. So that was fun, guys. You stay safe. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. In the meantime, please remember to register at ama.preventbreach.com/register so you can make sure you get those emails and recommendations. Thanks so much. Stay safe. We'll see you soon.